Hey, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. This is Harry from Hasbro TV back on a match reaction video. Tottenham Hotspur 1, Fulham 2. Another loss at home. It's actually our fourth loss of the season, I think, at home. Arguably, if anyone watched my stream on Friday, which is very short, I said it was a must-win game, and we didn't win it. Now, bear in mind, and in this video, I've not watched any other people's match reactions or any other streams, which I imagine by this point will probably be saying Frank out. At least that's the vibe I get anyway from WhatsApp chats. But personally, just get out of the way first. I don't see any point in sacking Frank. Those people called for other managers come in, like Iraola, who's not doing even very well. I think he's only won 3 games out of his last 10 or something at Bournemouth. Or other managers, of course, pining for Glasner, who's not going to leave Palace anytime soon. At least, definitely not this January or this new year. I don't think is the right way to see it. Spurs have major problems. So I'm going to talk about the bigger picture very quickly first, and then we'll get into the game. Changing managers is not going to solve the problems. The rot with the players in terms of just the type of players we have on the roster, as people say in America, and what we're trying to do with the type of players we have, or what Spurs fans want us to try and do with the players we have, it's just not going to work. Hence why there's a lot of emphasis on crosses, because we don't have a progressor. While Sarr and Bergwall are runners, or ball carriers, that's how I see them. They're not really progressive passers of the ball. Bentancur used to be like that, but his ACL and coupled with his age is kind of killed most of that out of him. He never was like a proper playmaker, but he had a bit of that in him. Xavi, of course, is the one that everyone's been pining for, especially for X. But his small cameo, as of recording this, the day after or the morning after the game, he didn't really do much when he came on as a sub for like 20 minutes. And some people may point to the fact that he didn't start, but Xavi's not really impressed since he's come in. And he's probably the one that everyone's earmarked as the progressor. And he's only 22 in the new league. As we've seen, Wirtz has struggled as well, mirroring kind of the same thing, which has meant Slot kind of used him as not as much as he'd like to. And Xavi, I think, is even a slighter build than Wirtz, personally, in my opinion. And he's struggled as well. So Xavi is labelled as our saviour, but I just don't think he's, at least not right now, is our saviour to be the playmaker that everyone clearly wants so he can dictate the game, right? He's not, if he was, again, we go back to the summer, if we signed Eze or Gibbs White, I'd be having a different conversation right now. We would have that player, really. So anyway, let's get into the starting lineup. Vicario in goal. Yes, we'll talk about him in a second. So, of course, the fullbacks were rotated. This time it was Udogie and Porro. Ironically, these are the two that people have been clamouring to play together for a very long time. And obviously Van de Ven with Danso, because Romero was suspended after his 5th yellow card against Arsenal. And Frank went with a pretty similar sort of make-up to the PSG game, which people say, or some people say at least, was arguably one of our best performances. Except the midfield was Gray, Palhinha. So Palhinha replaced Bentancur. So Gray retained his spot. Bergwall was on the left, at least initially. And Kudus came back in on the right. And Sarr was dropped to the bench. So I guess he kept the same 4-4. And obviously it was Richarlison and Moani up front again. 4-4-2, 4-2-2-2. A diamond, some people thought it was. So we started like that. And of course, Fulham exposed us. They overloaded a lot of the left. Their left, our right. And Porro was just done, just in no man's land. Really, I think the biggest issue with me for Porro today, or yesterday, was okay, and this is not completely his fault because Kudus wasn't really helping him out either. But he was going forward too much towards the ball in the sense that when he was pushing up, there was a lot more space in the wide area, like behind him. And Fulham just exploiting this constantly. Coupled with the fact that Spencer's obviously a much better defender than him as a natural defender. it was always going to result in a bad thing. But Fulham just exploited our weakness, which is evident throughout the game, and they scored their first goal. And I'm very disappointed in Bergvall because the ball goes across the goal. First of all, I don't know what Gray's doing in regards to like not trying to block the ball or tackle the player when he's around him. I can't remember who it was across from Fulham, but Gray was around that area. And then the ball comes across and Bergvall half-heartedly puts his foot out and just didn't get the ball. And then Tete, wherever it was, scores the goal. It deflects off Udogie, who again, I kind of question a bit of his commitment here because I think he could have put a bit more in front of his body to protect the goal. But it deflects off him and it goes in. Now, that was a horrific start. Within 3-4 minutes, 1-0 down at home. But I guess at that point it was still salvageable. And then, I can't believe this. Vicario does another blunder. This time, it's probably one of the worst blunders I think I've ever seen from a keeper. So he comes out. He has 3 instances, some you might even argue 4, to clear the ball. Instead, he kicks it. And as we know, Vicario can't kick the ball very well, as a goalkeeper especially. I mean, he just doesn't lump it out, kicks it straight to one of the Fulham players, who lays it off to Harry Wilson, who, to be fair to him, was a great finish, but curls it in of Vicario running back into the goal. And of course, Vicario, knowing him, he'd blame everyone else. But the guy had 4 instances to clear the ball, and he didn't. And here we are, 2-0 down within 6-7 minutes of the game. And we really struggled, huffed and puffed. One noticeable tactical change is as soon as it went to 2-0, or within 5 minutes, it went to 2-0, Frank calls over Danso, who then lays on another instruction, says go 4-3-3. So Kudus pushes further up. Richarlison Moani sort of will swap him, but I think Moani was taking up more of a left-hand side in this point. And obviously the midfield 3 became Bergvall, Gray and Bentancur. And I think this kind of alluded to more of our struggles in midfield, even though it kind of made us clog some of the gaps that we were leaving Fulham. And maybe Frank thought having more channels was a better way to stop the overloads that they were creating on the wide areas, which in theory should work. But the midfield is where we were losing. Gray, Bergvall, for all his running and hard work, which I'll give him massive credit for, wasn't really impacting the game. And like I said, I kind of put some blame on Gray and Bergvall, especially Bergvall more for the first goal. The second one, that's just Vicario. And this is why we need to buy a new keeper. But we huffed and puffed. Surprisingly, he gets to half time and he doesn't make any changes. The game carries on and on and on. Eventually, he does make some changes. But just before he makes some changes, Kudus scores. By this point, Spurs were pressing. We had a few other chances. Moani had a couple this whole game. One header, which, to be fair to him, I think he got a lot on it. And in hindsight, it probably was a very difficult chance. And Kudus eventually scores, but he still brings the changes. Bentancur, Xavi, come on. Not to a lot of people's surprise. I think Xavi was, a lot of people wanted him to start, let alone just be a sub. And he rings on for 3 changes. Gray comes off. Bergvall stays on though. And we go 4-3-3. Bentancur comes on for Paulinho. And Odobert joins the fray on the left-hand side. And he did kind of help us a bit because it gave us, rather than always going to the right, Odobert at least gives us some form of an option on the left. So we huffed and puffed, but we couldn't break them down. Moani had like I alluded to earlier, another chance, and he backheeled it. It was quite unlucky, actually. I thought Moani was probably, again, one of our better players tonight, or last night, whenever we want to see this as. And we've lost 2-1. So I know Frank made some comments about the Vicario booing, but I'm not going to agree with him here. I think the fans are more than entitled to boo players who do mistakes like Vicario does. And as I alluded to, maybe I'm a bit biased because I do not like Vicario. I thought he's an okay goalkeeper, but we blew him up much more than he was and is. He's an okay goalkeeper. Yeah, he's a good shot stopper, but that's a given for me as a Premier League goalkeeper. You have to be a good shot stopper, but the rest, he can't kick a football. And in this modern game, you have to be able to whack it. But it's just, he's cost us too much. And in January, I'd even argue that goalkeeper is more priority than the forward at this point, because it's just, we need to sign a Premier League goalkeeper that's not going to make these stupid mistakes every week. And he makes them very frequently. So I know a lot of people say sack Frank, and I don't see us, because we're playing Newcastle away next, I don't see us getting something from that game. And then we have Brentford at home, which again is going to become like a must win. But yeah, there's no point in sacking Frank. As I said at the start of the video, the rot is massive. I mean, the back line, he has done some work with them, but we still look at 6s and 7s. Porro and Udogie, it's like they're playing under Ange today. And the midfield, I think he has to stop persisting with Gray, really. I think Bergvall showed enough for me to be like, okay, we should keep him as a squad player for now, and hopefully in a couple of years maybe he'll become more than he is. Sarr obviously is kind of like a senior player now, so he kind of has to do something. But with Gray, you know, I just don't see anything really with Gray. But that's what I mean. Like, he's tried to mix up. We tried a 4-3-3, we tried a 4-4-2. There's even a point in the game when Odegaard was playing left back / left wing, and we we're playing like a lopsided back forward, back three, whatever you want to call it, because we were chasing to get the second goal when Tell came on. So he tries, at least to be fair to Frank, compared to Ange, he tries like everything. But just he's not found his best 11 or the best formation. I guess we thought we found that against PSG, but today showed that we didn't. Because what I noticed Marco Silva did to counteract the fact we went to a back four and sort of like a very narrow midfield is he overloaded the wide areas, especially obviously our right. But also he left 4 players on our 4 defenders, which pushed us further back. So we couldn't really progress the ball through the defence, which, you know, as a lot of teams do nowadays, they play the ball around the back and try and play like a longer pass. And this is the problems we have. So for me, there's no point in sacking Frank. Unfortunately, the problems we have at Tottenham will not be solved within 1 season. I think he might even take 2, 3, like at least 2 years, if not 3 years. That's how many holes we have in the squad and how little chemistry really the team has. And we lack identity because Frank does tinker a lot, but that's partly because he's the first manager ever, I think, at Spurs I remember has played his first season in the Champions League. And this is quite a hindrance. Before, at least Ange's first season, he had 3 weeks, as in like 1 game a week, so it makes things a lot easier to preparation, but it's a tough job. And I still stand by what I said in previous videos. We're not ready for Champions League football. It's just that we're in it because if we didn't win that final, we would be I don't know what players we would have signed in the summer. It would have been very difficult. So anyway, let's just end this with a common new Spurs, and hopefully we can get something in Newcastle.